seen any of his stand-up specials?
Oh, I need to go and watch his.
He's pretty. They're pretty funny.
Sure.
His most recent one is literally just him on stage like complaining about politics the whole time.
It's amazing.
Hilarious.
I mean, gosh, dude just has like
I remember there was one time where he was like bashing on Hillary or something. It was like one of those videos where like Bill Burr smashes feminists or something, and it's like he didn't really smash them. Like he had a recent discussion,
right?
But he was like talking about it, and somebody booed him, and he just like called him out. He's like, "Hey, you, what are you doing?
You really think that? Hey, you really think that?"
It was his joke about how like, Hillary lost to Trump, like, and I forget what he said, but it was just so funny.
Yeah, I think
she lost. I think it was on Conan or something. I don't remember, but he's like, she lost to Trump. Like, that's like the worst. Like, don't try again.
I think, gosh, I think it was playing off of him being she's like, you lost the presidency to a guy who runs a late night show with celebrities trying to make fake companies. Like,
yeah.
Just quit.
Yeah.
Freaking Alexa, get out of my house. Who sends the DNA into the internet?
Oh,
it's dumb.
Gosh.
You're basically begging the Illuminati to make their clone for you. He's like, but I don't know. But I don't know.
He takes it even further. He's like a He's like a casual conspiracy theorist. He's like, I don't know. Maybe there are people out there controlling us.
That's just how he's always got but I don't know. Joe, I don't know.
You know,
I don't know, Joe.
Oh, his Joe Rogan interviews are great too.
But yeah, and there's all this stuff, and you're just like this. I play the drums, Joe. It's like, oh, I freaking love Bill Burr. That man.
Oh gosh, are we going at it?
You bet it.
What up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast, where we bring pop culture to the pit.
You bet it.
If you want to bring it to the pit with us, you can send us questions at popculturepunks@gmail.com. This week, we'll be diving into the world of comedy. When are jokes just jokes? Should comedy be held to the same standards as other speech? Are comedians on the forefront of culture in the battle for freedom of speech and expression, or are they just using humor as an excuse to be offensive and mean? But before we get to that, Josh, what have you been up to the past couple weeks?
My boy, let me tell you.
You like that little intro I added there?
I really badly, I wish I would have read through it better before you started, because all I could hear in my head was just like, doo-doo-doo-doo. News flash. Comedians in hot seats? Is it funny or a bad pun? Will we put out the fire of this insanity, or will it burn us alive with all our bad jokes? I'm Kent Brockman, tuning in with the firing of James Gunn.
Oh, gosh.
No, I'm just kidding.
Save that one for later.
so anyway, that was a long-winded joke. I just finished City of Owls, the follow-up to Court of Owls, which is the Batman comic, and I dug it. I
don't think I finished City of Owls
yet.
It
ended really abruptly, and went into like a little bit of like Mr. Freeze stuff, so I just kind of stopped there because I'm not planning on.
Yeah, it continues on to a different storyline. So.
I think I missed some stuff. Otherwise, Court of Owls I think was much better. I think City of Owls was too surprise. There's a big reveal, but it was like
the payoff wasn't what you thought it would be.
I don't really care. It's like that could have been cool, but I have like a singular other comic edition worth of backstory, so I don't really have an investment in who this person is, who now they're saying who they are, and we're not even sure, and blah blah blah. So but it was good. I can see myself finding more comics like that, whether it's Batman or other superheroes that are more just, I don't know, just not familiar to me. Like, I would say all my knowledge of Batman is from like the Dark Knight movies or Batman Beyond, some of those peripheral things that aren't really, it's like the what's a good word for it? It's the stereotypical things associated with Batman, like dark, brooding,
like the pop culture stuff, yeah.
Alfred, the Batmobile. It's like, I don't know, Adam West, things like that. But it was good. It was good. I really want to start. I have like all the volumes for Spidey 2099, so I want to actually like
get into
start
that.
cranking through that.
Nice.
And I think I have one edition of Moon Knight that I still have that I haven't touched yet. So I gotta jump into that. I got a lot of things to jump into.
Yeah, you've been busy, so
I've been busy. There's been a lot of things. Yeah. So finish that. That has been awesome. And speaking of Spidey, my boy, we talked a little bit about it earlier. That freaking special edition PS4.
Oh gosh.
I literally like almost just like gently laid on the ground and was like, how do I make this work? Like what do I do? Like, what do I do to get the stupid thing? I solved the problem. I have it pre-ordered. And as of today, I basically have it paid off.
Boom shakalaka.
Via all the old crap sitting in my house that I didn't play anymore. So
nice.
Like when I initially saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally sell stuff and make it and I wouldn't have to spend extra money. And I just like slowly turned to my GameCube collection and just...
You even tweeted that. I'm like, oh no.
I was just like, I literally had Melee, my 2 Poke games, and Double Dash. I was like, these 4 alone could probably sell enough to pay for it. And I was like,
easy.
I can do it without you. I promise. I will make it work. And I did. So... I was able to get it. I was really surprised that no one had snatched every single one of those up yet, but I am also extremely biased, so I'm not surprised if everyone's
they might be pumping out a lot too with the rate that PS4s are selling. They might just have
which should be kind of interesting because I feel like, but I don't know, special editions for consoles I feel like are such a consoles. I'm realizing how
Consoles.
I'm realizing how much consoles are a really weird beast in terms of special editions because I think handhelds, they're a little more justifiable because it's a smaller... So, like, if there's a crazy Metroid edition of a Switch that comes out that looks really cool, it's like, oh, I would maybe invest in that, but it's also $300 and I already have one, so do I really need it? Whereas now it's like, ooh, I don't think I would have gone so hard to make it work and get it if it wasn't a pro. That was a huge draw.
If it wasn't the pro, then it's like...
Yeah, then it's like I'm basically just getting a red one with a decal, and at that point, it's like it's not worth the effort. But now to get a free copy of the game which comes with it, which I was like, holy smokes, that's awesome.
And it's one of those things where if you're going to upgrade anyway, you might as well just get the Spidey one that you want.
Yeah, and I feel like the percent or the likelihood of me being upset later on of like actually investing in it and upgrading even if something new comes out, it's like doesn't matter, I got the dope looking
Spidey by that point you'll have more money anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of those things where you're just like I could rebuy some of the stuff later if I need to.
Totally told that to me. She was like, but what happens when the PS5 comes out in like 2 years? I was like, that's 2 years from now. I'll figure it out.
Exactly.
She's like, are you going to sell that one? I was like, heck no. I'll just
have them side by side.
Yeah, it'll be all good.
PS5 might not even be backwards compat, so you never know.
That's true. I don't know. That's a whole nother discussion. That's a whole nother can of worms. We're not even going to look at it. But yeah, I'm super stoked for that. I've been like...
Does that come out with the game?
Yes.
Like so you're going to get it in September?
Yep. I was looking at it. It's a Friday. I was like, taking the day off. Done. It's already done. It's easy. I was like, that is the easiest decision of my life. It is a Friday. It is the Pro. It is one of the games I've been looking most forward to.
Hopefully that game is enhanced too.
It is.
It's got to be enhanced because
they're if you go on Sony's official page where they have the stuff, they have screenshots at the bottom where it's like captured in the PS4 Pro, and I'm like, it's gonna be
a fun day.
Oh, it's gonna be pretty. So
does that come out at midnight? Do you think? Like, are you gonna be able to?
Oh, that's an even better question.
Because then you just get up, play all day, Spidey all day,
oh
baby.
My gosh,
get it downloaded and ready to go.
I could probably beat the game in a day. I've just been seeing like they've been releasing new suits that are in the game, and like
some of those look sick.
Oh man, I'm stupid excited.
Dope.
So that's gonna be awesome. Yeah, and I didn't have to say goodbye to my beloved GameCube collection. I'm trying so hard not to sell all the rare stuff I have because, like, all the other crap I got rid of, I was like, if I really, really, really want that,
you could probably
5 years
get it
from
back
now,
for the
I
same
could get it
price.
for like $20.
Yeah, or
like,
even cheaper
for what it is. But I was just like eyeing Melee, and I was
the
like,
stuff that
that's
you
like
know is going to be more valuable in 5 years.
Yep.
It's hard to get rid of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that, and let's see. the last one we'll get into later. But I got the wife extremely hooked on Attack on Titan, and I am unbelievably excited about that. So I think we watched, out of all the friends that I've watched the show with, she is the one that we have watched the most amount of episodes in the fewest amount of sittings, I think, ever.
Wow.
Like, shattered the record. Like, I think we watched like 13 in a day.
Dang.
Like, it was like, yeah.
She likes it that much?
Yeah, she's
What does
really,
she like about it?
That's what's really funny.
Because it's very violent and creepy.
I think what's really funny is like she doesn't do this in other stuff, but she talks a lot during it, so I think she copes that way. She's like, "Oh no, this is so bad, everyone's dying," versus just being like sheer grossed out.
It's like me during that scary game that we played.
Yeah,
My way of coping with the horror of it is just a joke about it.
Exactly. I think really, having rewatched it now, I think there's really only a couple moments in the first few episodes that are like viscerally violent, that are like pretty unsettling. That's like when Aaron's mom gets eaten and when he gets eaten, because it's like very, very clear that his like arm gets like bitten off and he's missing a leg and stuff like that. And then his mom getting eaten is pretty gruesome too. Yeah,
you can just like feel the pop, or like you can like, for some reason you can like feel what it feels like when you watch it. You're just
you're just they just sit on it so long and the chomp and the blood. It's just it's messy, but she's really enjoyed it, and I can't speak entirely as if I fully know, but from the vibe I've gotten, she loves the mystery to it. And she's really enjoyed like catching on to things, and she's been really quick to like tie loose ends together. And she's enjoyed it as just like it's really funny watching it with her, because I'm watching it because it's like, oh my gosh, the emotion and the narrative, and dude, I've almost cried like 2 or 3 times. I've seen this show like 5 times. I kid you not. And every single time there's these moments where I start getting like choked up, and I'm just like, you don't know that this is gonna be really sad. And so it's just like, and she's a lit teacher too, so she's picking up on some of the themes that I didn't even invest in, but that I've been like, wow, that's actually like she latched on really hard to how everyone is talking constantly the value of their life, and how as soldiers it's constantly in the context of being a soldier that all the soldiers ask, is my life doing something? Even if I'm dying, is it dying for something? And like the only comfort that they can have is like sometimes no. Like sometimes it's
part
just,
of the dread is like the lady breaking down, like
in the very
did
first
my
one,
son die for something? And he's like, I can't tell you.
Yeah, he's
yes
like, I don't
no.
know. Like all we do is we keep going out and we keep failing and we keep losing more, and like we don't know anymore. And then the other one too, I think that got me choked up is when it's that guy in the ground that Levi saves, and he goes to him and he's like, Captain, did I die? Did I bring humanity closer to victory? Like, did I die for a purpose? And he like tells him, and he's like, and you're going to inspire, like your death is going to inspire other soldiers after you. And then he like looks at him again and he's like gone. And he's like, do you think he heard it? And she's like, he must have, like, just look at his face. And it's just like, gosh, it's such a heavy show, but it just raises like really deep questions beyond the mystery aspect. And I think I'm just amazed how they handle stuff. Like, and again, I've seen it so many times that I know a lot of the major set pieces that are happening, but there's just these little things that, I
feel like the payoff has always been satisfying so far.
Oh yeah.
Like, and the pacing is impeccable. Like they never give you
100%.
too much and they never give you too little, unless you watch that movie. Then they give you everything wrong.
Was so bad.
But the TV show itself never gives you too much or too little. The pacing is always just like on point.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating having seen the entire show. And usually when I would go back and watch with people, I'd already seen the first season, and that was when season 1 was the only one out. And so you'd get to pick up on other things where you're like, oh my gosh, they set that up the entire time. Where there's like a point where I thought was interesting is in season 2, it's right before they find out about Reiner and Berthold, and Hanji asks them like, did they and Annie ever interact, or like were they spending a lot of time together? And they like flash, and all the characters like no, like they never did. But there's distinct moments throughout the entire first season in the Trost arc where
it shows
it's
them together.
all three of them
Yep.
all the time in the shots, and it finally clicked to that Annie was involved with. It just clicked. So many things clicked, like with season 2. So spoilers, however many minutes in, spoilers for Attack on Titan, and I'll tell you when it ends. So season 2, there's the part where you find out about Marco, which is one of their good friends who died, and Jean finds him, and that's actually the catalyst for Jean to join the Scouts. And you find out that Reiner's actually the one who killed him, but like Reiner has PTSD, and it's super trippy. And it was really interesting because there's a part in that whole part in the first season where they're walking around finding all the dead bodies, where Annie's like looking down at someone, but you can't see who it is. And she's looking down at someone. She's like crying. She's like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm so sorry. And it kind of clicked where it's like, was that Marco she was like, holy crap. Like, they don't want to do half the stuff that they did because she's the one who had his gear.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oh my gosh, like there's just these like little hints that all of a sudden, if you like think about it later on, you're like, oh my gosh, they all work together constantly. And it makes sense that like they're the ones who came and did this. And oh my gosh.
It's a crazy show, man.
Yeah. So we just finished the episode where, it's the one where like they're like furiously eating the ration bars or whatever.
Oh,
and it's like a really good moment where, Hannes is like, but like we'll get him and we'll bring him home because I can't have the normal. And you're like, yeah. And then it's just like, if there was a subtitle for it, it's furious eating where it ensues.
Yeah.
And so that was the episode we just finished, but she was like wigging out at the reveal. And she was just like, oh my gosh. She was like, that was like out of nowhere. She was like, they built up everything and then this was out of nowhere. So it's been a lot of fun to see her get so excited and to enjoy it. I mean, if she didn't, she like was like, well, I'm going to watch it because I know you love it so much, but because she's an amazing wife, because she listens to this occasionally. So I got to make it clear. But yeah, so it's been a lot of fun to hear like her things and the things that she's contributing and the things that she's picking up that are more important to her than necessarily like are to me, but that are good. Like the whole, purpose of life and meaning and narratives like that. So we're excited. We're almost through season 2. So I think we're going to watch season 3 together.
Season 3 debuted a couple days ago. So
yeah. So I mean, I'd already seen that one. I'm trying to get her
I need to watch
up.
it again so I can see it without the context of that movie.
Yeah. Right after it. Oh, having gone through the show again sequentially now through season 2. I am stupid excited for this season. Yeah. I just have no idea what's going to happen. And
it's going to be awesome.
So end of Attack on Titan spoilers now.
Boom shakalaka.
At least I'm assuming, unless you're about to go on like a deep dive. But
no,
I don't
probably
think that's
won't.
the case.
No. Maybe we'll do a different episode, fully focused on Attack on Titan.
Solid.
Once season 3 is like halfway through or something.
I'd be cool with that.
Is that everything?
Yep.
You've been going on?
Yep.
I got a lot of stuff here, but it'll all be pretty quick. Speaking of wives hopping on the bandwagon, I've been playing a lot of Pokemon Go, which got Evan to download it, and now she's like level 20, and she's like
nice
playing a crap ton. We had a wedding last weekend, and it was in Wausau, and there's like a 400 block, which they have like a lot of concerts there and stuff, but there's like 3 Pokestops within like this bench. So me, her, and Jacob, and then one of our other friends were like, we had like 2 hours between the wedding and whatever, and we were all just sitting there like Pokestops. We dropped a bunch of lures down,
that's
and we were
amazing.
like,
yeah.
It was
just
super
grinding.
fun. But it's been fun playing with her. Like she'll come home and we'll talk about our days and all that stuff, the usual, and then
she's like,
she'll like show me all the
Pokies?
Pokemon that she caught that day,
Nice.
and like I'll explain to her a lot of things because she doesn't know a lot. So it's been fun, good bonding experience
for sure. What got her hooked on it?
I don't even know. Like one time I came home because I was like joking with her. I was like, one of these days you're gonna like download this or something because like I was playing it and
Sure.
like we'd go on walks and I'd be like checking in like whatever and all this stuff. and we'd talk about it, and I'd explain a lot of Pokemon things to her. Just like she's basically just graciously listening to me
Like
talk about Pokemon and
fake
whatnot.
monsters, yeah.
But then I came home from work one day, and she's like, "I downloaded Pokemon Go, and I'm level 5 already." I'm like, "Let's go!"
You're like, "Oh my gosh, I love you."
So I think it's fun to collect things, and I think she just enjoys it because it's a good bonding experience for us to just talk about stuff and do something fun together. So
cool.
That's been fun. I've been reading a lot of comics still. I've been cranking through the first 49 issues of Invincible, which is a really good comic.
I've seen Imperious Rex's stuff go up on that, and it sounds...
I didn't watch the video yet because they're going to spoil it, I think. So I've been like literally yesterday I read like the first 36 issues. I was just reading all night long. So I'm trying to get through the first 49, which I think their first video covers.
Is there an omnibus of that coming out anytime soon, or is
there's
all the issues
3? What are they called? I forget what they're called, but there's
kind of like
a compendium. I think it's called a compendium. Invincible Compendium.
Okay, cool.
There's 3 total volumes of those. They're like thick, like this big, paperback. I've heard they have good bindings though, and I think they're like, if you buy them on Amazon, they're like $50-ish bucks. If you buy them on in-stock trades, they're like 36.
Got it. It sounds like it's like a big series then. But
it's like 145 issues.
Holy cow!
So it's a long run. It's been really good so far. I think the storytelling is awesome. The characters are fun. It's like an homage and a critique at the same time to the superhero genre.
Interesting.
And it's like a drama sort of. It's very interesting. It's hard to explain. I don't know how to explain it to people when they ask. So.
If you could give like a general premise in comparison to other superhero stuff, what makes this one different?
What makes it different is it's grounded in like family dynamic. So like the main character when it begins is a high schooler, and then he goes to college to run like 30-ish issues, which isn't really a spoiler. It's inconsequential, but so it's kind of like one part like a family drama, and then another part like a superhero epic. And so it kind of like ties those two things together. And it's got like the very small, intricate like drama between people's lives, and not like CW drama, like real like friendships and relationships and all this stuff. But then that also expands into like this huge universe. Like there's aliens and like alien species. Like he's part Viltrumite, which is like this alien species, which is kind of like kryptonite sort of thing. And so like there's a lot of characters that are like analogs for other things, and there's like little nods to superheroes, and it's just like a really fun, both like small but infinitely expanding.
Sure.
It's kind of like it's got like all that that stuff. So
nice.
It just feels fresh to a lot of the stuff. So I've been cranking through that, just like so I can watch the Imperious videos without spoiling.
Sure.
Evan and I watched Iron Man 3.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which reminded me that it's actually a really good movie. I think it's my favorite of the Iron Man films.
I've heard people say it's either 1-3-2 or 3-1-2.
Yeah,
I've heard from most people.
And Evan said it made her like Tony Stark a little bit more, and it was her favorite Iron Man film. So
not as big of a tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was the turning point for Tony Stark of him realizing that he's not invincible, and there's like a lot of things that could go wrong very quickly if he's not careful. I canceled my pre-order for Fallout 76.
I saw your tweet got some traction too.
Yeah, I was getting likes and replies. Everybody was.
They were like, "You're totally right, bro," and I was like, "That's my boy."
Yeah, they definitely clarified that everybody does get the beta, but the beta is only a month before the game comes out, which.
That's sketch.
Yeah, Pete Hines replied to a lot of things. He didn't reply to me specifically, but he replied and said like the main focus of the beta is not like bugs per se. It's like network and like
server testing.
How many people can be here? How like kind of like testing the servers and see like the online aspect of it, which is fine. But I still think it's Bethesda and they could use that help. Finding bugs, especially with their first entry into the online world. So I'll probably get it eventually, but I think I'm gonna wait till Black Friday or something because it's gonna be a mess when it comes out. Like nobody's gonna be able to play that game.
Yeah,
the servers are gonna crash. I know for a fact. Like it looks so fun, but at the same time, I'm not. It'll be on sale for Black Friday.
Yeah, so. I'm a little concerned about how that's gonna go down because Not necessarily the server issue, because I feel like every other game and their mother has a server issue. Like, I remember The Division, there was like that hilarious glitch where there was the physics problem where they had a physical line.
You actually had to stand in line.
The PC version where you actually had to stand in line.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
That was just hilarious. I couldn't believe that. But there's things like that where that's going to happen, or it's going to be crazy popular and they had no idea, and it's going to crash. Like, I think those things are forgivable. I think straight up the game just looks to me like Fallout with multiple people just there. I just don't like it.
I know. The thing that draws me to it is the world.
Of course,
and like
yeah.
the world building and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like in my mind that's not enough to outweigh what could go wrong with everything else. Like, there still needs to be a story. There still needs to be, like, there's no NPCs. The only people are other people. And those are kind of things where I'm like, that could be fine, because BioShock worked fine with that mechanic. There wasn't a whole lot of people. There was just audio logs and stuff.
But I think the other thing with BioShock, though, is there's a clear directive, and it's a very short game.
Yeah.
Like, it is, like, you can beat it in, like, one sitting if you really, really tried.
Yeah. So I think with everything I know, I just don't feel right about it. Something just feels wrong.
Especially for $60 too.
I know.
Like,
and so like I think I'm just gonna wait till Black Friday and get it up to like $40 or something. And see once all the dust settles and they get complaints resolved and stuff, maybe it'll become better. I don't know. But I'm extremely skeptical about it, especially after the announcement that the beta's only a month before. I was like, yikes. I got a lot of traction with that tweet too.
Yeah. Do it for the pod, baby.
I randomly got into the Foozy tube. I don't know if you saw anything about that.
I did, yeah.
The dude like stopped taking his bipolar meds and he like went full on Kanye and just like got like I watched so much of his interviews because I was just fascinated with it. Like, I got super annoyed eventually. I was like, this dude like something is going on and nobody is telling this dude like, hey, you need to get help. Like,
yeah, well,
he was like oh, I can't even explain it.
No,
like, he was just hyper manic basically.
Yeah, and it's like, it's really frustrating because I saw the Philly D video on it. That's how I heard about it.
Yeah.
And it was really frustrating, and it was really eye opening too, especially with the Demi Lovato situation that happened this week too with her OD. And granted, I think she's doing okay, but I don't know, man. Like, it was just eye opening of like how much I think so many people say yes to stars, and there's just such a sad pattern in the pop culture world, especially in like music and stuff, where so much pain fuels their income. And like, we're not talking like, oh, I make my $40,000 a year living off of my sadness. It's like, I make so much money I don't know what to do with off my sadness, so like I need to be really sad. And not that it's everybody, but there just seems to be like her, like a couple months ago she was singing a song called Relapse, I think, or something, and it's like I think that's just a scary place to be. And I know like NF has like written songs about that, where he's wrestled with the idea of like, people love my music because it's real and it's painful, but that means I'm living in my pain to write good music, and what's that costing me, really? Like, if are they living off of my pain, or are they living off of the art? And I think it's just scary how like someone like that, who's going through a really real thing that he needs help, that no one's saying like, dude, like, you need to like do this, like you need help, like we need to help.
And I mean,
you,
people are telling him he needs help, because he explicitly said like he stopped taking his medication because his medication was like holding him back, like, from thinking freely. So like, he's like, as soon as I stopped taking my medication, my mind expanded, and like, and he's just talking about like how like he's clearly manic, like something's going on. But it's just fascinating to watch. It's kind of like watching a car wreck. I think Philly D said that. It's just like, you don't like, you feel bad for it, but it's like interesting to watch.
Yeah.
But hopefully he gets some help, because he's not learning from any of the mistakes that happened. He tried to throw like this whole event and it failed, but in his mind it succeeded. And like, it's just like, he has very grandiose thoughts right now.
Yeah. And that doesn't go anywhere good.
No.
Fast.
So yeah. which is scary because if he is bipolar, then he's going to drop at some point, and it's going to be
People
bad,
need to be there for him. Yeah.
Yeah. So at least, I mean, through all of this, at least he's unknowingly raising awareness to the people around him, like, hey, watch this dude, because he might crash soon.
Yeah. Or people are just gonna laugh at him. Like that's the
I
thing
know
I'm
that's
concerned
the thing with
is
YouTube and all this stuff is like
people are just out for blood. Like I would not be surprised if there's a very
and I mean FouseyTube's been kind of a joke in the YouTube sphere as of late. I think just because like he does this kind of nonsense, and he was like the fake social experiment guy from back in the day that Philly D was always on, but. I don't know, man. It's been interesting
it's been a weird
stuff.
Past couple weeks.
Yeah.
Just some of the things that have been happening.
Yeah. I saw Ant-Man and the Wasp when I was up in Michigan a couple weekends ago, which I thought was really good. I liked it. It's a good follow-up.
Better than the first one?
I think so. I can't exactly remember what happens in the first one, but it had the same feeling.
Cool.
I like the non-grandiose nature of the Ant-Man movies. Like, I feel like the Avengers has gotten so cosmic in scale already that I like the smaller scale of Ant-Man.
It's kind of like that Spider-Man Homecoming kind of vibe where it's like actual local superhero.
Yeah, I like that vibe.
Cool.
But it does have a tie-in into like Infinity War and stuff. So you got to watch after credits.
So. I need to go see that soon.
I still need to see Incredibles.
Oh, bro,
we're on the inverse.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, that was good. So that's mostly it. And then there was a new MXPX album, which has been pretty fun to jam.
Nice.
Some old school punk.
Solid. So. Oh, that makes me, my shout out of the week is, I don't know how I haven't heard of her before, but it's Jackie Hill Perry, I think, from Humble Beast.
Yeah.
Dang, man. Holy cow. Like, just some of her song, like I don't know who to compare her to. Because I told Gloria about her, and I would almost say she is like not quite, but if I had to compare her to somebody, she's in a way almost like a female Kendrick, where her beats aren't like a Lecrae, like I mean his new album was like a trap album, so obviously like not that, but even like a KB or Andy Mineo, where it's not as hip hoppy and like upbeat, it's a little more like almost like actual hip-hop drum beats, you know, like someone actually playing like a set and then putting like other sounds and instruments behind it. But then her flow and her actual cadence too is just top notch. But it's that unconventional rhyme scheme that fits really well with the music, but isn't like da 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 end rhyme da 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 end rhyme da 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 like that kind of free flow. So she reminds me of like a female Kendrick, and she's just stupid good. And it's so gosh, what is her album called? I've
heard of her. I haven't listened to her music though.
Crescendo is her album. Yeah. So Jackie Hill Perry Crescendo, if you're looking for some rap beats.
Nice.
I think the song that I heard that got me hooked is it's called Lamentations, and it's super good jam.
Nice.
So yeah.
Cool.
Now on to the meat of, I don't know how I'm going to handle this. This deep
of
a topic.
We got some questions from our boy Marky Mark.
Lots of them. So those will be filing out week by week as we tackle some of them in episodes.
Yeah, this is just the ones about comedy. So I'll run through all of the questions and then we can pick it apart like I did in the document. So he said, comedy has become much darker and more self-deprecating in the last few years. Usually this is tied to how the country is doing. How do you think that will change in the future? Will this culture of being easily offended affect comedy? And can comedians push boundaries without getting fired or receiving death threats from keyboard warriors who defend people who are not offended by the joke in the first place? I think that was added on. I don't remember that being in the original one, but maybe not. So yeah, comedy has become much darker and more self-deprecating in the last few years. He added a caveat, or we asked him some more questions about this because
and he sent
it's a very strong statement to make.
So he sent us a number of articles and stuff, and we actually did some digging of our own, and I think I did. I was bored at work. So.
I mean, I watch enough recent comedy that I can tell what he's talking about. I think, because he specifically calls out Rick and Morty. which is really, and South Park.
Rick and
which
Morty.
I don't agree with the South Park thing, but I agree with the Rick and Morty thing. I think Rick and Morty is like existentialist, as existential and nihilistic as you can make a cartoon.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
How do we go?
What are your thoughts? Like,
so
your general impression of comedy, do you think it's darker, and is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I would flat out say comedy just isn't as good now as it was back in the past. I think that's looking at the present and the past with an unequal lens, so I don't know if that's entirely fair.
Yeah.
But at least from the things that I've been watching and experiencing, and really it's with a lot of stuff, there's just a lack of creativity or seeming connection like with the craft. And I think I gotta try and not go all over the board because this is a really complex discussion. I do actually agree, but not holistically. I think what's happened is not necessarily that comedy has become darker, but the darker comedy has become more mainstream, I would say. I say that because, I mean, like, you had, like, the George Carlins back in the day, and, I mean, granted, I would say he was kind of on the cusp of that happening, but there's been a number of, like, dark comedies that came out of, like, the 80s and 90s, and...
Yeah, it kind of depends on how you define darker and self-deprecating, because
yes,
those can be two very different things.
And I think inherently comedy is self-deprecating.
Yeah.
I would say in its own nature.
I think comedy's always self-deprecating.
Right. But I would say that maybe like a more antagonistic self-deprecation. I think of like a Always Sunny in Philadelphia kind of thing. Like that is a fairly dark comedy, not in the sense of like, oh, there's like humor about like really horrible topics, but it's more like,
it's not like a literal dark comedy,
right,
but it's comedy that's like it's not like a Seinfeld or something,
yeah,
where it's
and,
like brighter. And
yeah, and I think to clarify our terms, because I think we're talking with very loaded terms with a lot of implications.
Because dark comedy is an actual genre. Where
exactly,
where
it's like usually humor surrounding
Rick and
like,
Morty
twisted.
has some dark comedy in it. Sometimes.
Yes, like Rick and Morty. Like Zach, I was just listening to the adult cartoon episode we did on the drive back, and like he had a really good point of like the dark comedy of the show. Like an example is they go to get these crystals or whatever, and this character that Rick makes dies along the way, and Morty's like, oh my gosh, he's dead, and then like Rick just basically snorts at these rocks, and Morty's like, I thought those were gas. He's like, no man, like they were to make this party crazier, and so it's like that's like dark comedy where it's like you're taking a serious subject of like death and the loss of life as like, but it's funny because I like did this thing.
Yeah,
so it kind of like points back at that. So
yeah.
So to define what I think I'm kind of interpreting it as and how I'm taking it is I do think that comedy has become more, gosh, like everything I feel like I could say is it already is. Like I was gonna say it's more negative, but it already is kind of it's always negative in a way.
Yeah, I think that's the problem is like,
I know exactly what he means.
I know what he means, but I don't fully agree with the statement because I think because he points out Ray Romano versus Bo Burnham, but like
and I would say like
when Ray Romano was big, like you had Larry David who was doing what Bo Burnham was doing.
We also had Ray Romano who was on Everybody Loves Raymond, which is basically like the most dysfunctional real life family that you could
and so
imagine.
like I think by darker he means existential, which I don't think comedy has always been existential in some ways. Because Rick and Morty is definitely different. But even because he says Futurama, but I think Futurama in some ways is like existential.
When it's again, and a lot of this stuff is very ambiguous too, and I also don't want to just dismantle the question either, because I know like what our tendency is, we're like, well, we don't agree because of like blah blah blah, and we like don't actually discuss the thing. But I think one of the things that is difficult is there's a million qualifications that we could offer that would nullify the statement, basically. Like it's like, well, like Bo Burnham is big. It's like, yeah, but like Phineas and Ferb is big, you know, and it's like, or like Rick, let's do two cartoons. Rick and Morty is big and it's really dark and existential. It's like, well, Phineas and Ferb is really big and it's a kid's cartoon and it's still really funny, but it's not like negative and dark. And granted, it's a child's cartoon, so I get it, but more to say that like you could argue in a haphazard way around.
Basically, you could argue either way.
Exactly.
I think, yeah, what he's getting at makes sense. I think if you look at the general stroke, even of just pop culture in general, if you look at the general stroke, it definitely has taken like, I wouldn't call it darker, but I would call it nihilistic or existential turn. Which, by calling it darker, you're placing value judgment on it to some extent. I think what he means is it's taking that turn, like there is no meaning, nothing really means anything other than what you create yourself, like the existentialist sort of thing, which I think like culture hopeless.
I don't know if that's.
I don't think existentialism is inherently hopeless, but I think it's kind of like basically going to the next question tied to how the country's doing. I think if you look at like our generation of people, I think a lot of people our age are crippled by student debt and expectations from parents, and authority structures are being dismantled, and all these things that are happening like through our generation, which have always happened, but I think it's happening a lot more rapidly in our generation. And I think that's produced people who are this way. Like even me and you, like we are much more cynical and pessimistic about like our parents' generation and the generation before that. And I think that manifests itself, or it is manifesting itself in comedy. Like Bo Burnham is the way he is because he sees the way comedy has always been. And he's like, this is dumb to some extent, but he is also self-referential in the sense that, yeah, but I'm only 20 something years old. I know nothing sort of thing. And so it's kind of like this lighthearted pessimism about things.
Maybe like critical, like comedy's become over, like
comedy's become always critical. Yeah. But it's become critical of itself.
When I think it's become critical of everything. Like I think there's you like go back in the day and like, yes, Saturday Night Live always made fun of the president. Like, yes, these comedians always made fun of like this thing or that thing, or like, yes, there's always been jokes about men and women and marriage and blah, blah, blah. But I think I have noticed a distinct popularity arising. And I think it was the video that you sent me about like analyzing Bo Burnham's comedy and what it meant in context to like other things. So for example, like The Office, they talk about like a lot of the comedy in The Office it's kind of like an ongoing existential crisis for all these people who are like, I go to this horrible job, I sit at this horrible desk, I have this horrible boss, but I need to be here because the world is horrible and I have to afford all the crap that I need to do. And I think I was watching a couple things and I've just kind of noticed one of the things I feel like happened, and I watched an interesting video and did some research, is I think that video specifically attributed the shift in tone to our transition from modernism to postmodernism as a culture. And I think that was really enlightening, and I actually really agree with that, because I think what happened is you kind of had in the modern era and in kind of the era that our parents grew up with, and the comedy and the people who were big at that time, and then the people who were coming up during that time, is I feel like that was still more stable, and people have always disagreed with things. People have always been sucky, and things have always been sucky to some extent. But I think to the extent and to the generation that it's happening to, and their willingness to deal with it and how they deal with it shifted radically. So you kind of had like, you have these family comedy dramas or whatever, and it's like, oh, this horrible situation, but ha ha ha, funny ending, and it all kind of comes together. Whereas now we have like The Office, where like marriages are falling apart and people are breaking up with this person and nothing ever really matters, and everyone's getting into all this trouble because of this horrible boss's stupid decisions, and I think in a weird way they're wrestling with really heavy, they're like taking things head on that I don't think previous generations always did. Which is kind of what I was trying to say, of like they're basically challenging the established ideas in some ways. Like Bo Burnham he's challenging the way that comedy's been done. Like
The Office is challenging the way comedy's been done,
Right.
and saying like, you think that you've capitalized on this certain thing of comedy, but we can do it an infinite number of ways.
Yeah,
which in some ways is the good part about postmodernism. It opens up the path for anything to be possible to some extent, but then it also scraps the idea of meaning to some extent.
Yeah, and I think
structure.
I think that's what was really interesting is the video. I wish we had. Do you have the name of the YouTuber who?
Wisecrack.
So there's a YouTube channel called Wisecrack, and they have a video analyzing the comedy of Bo Burnham, and his style is very like Art is Dead was one of the things we were just talking about, where he basically writes a song about how art is dead, but like artists are narcissistic, and like, wait a second, like we're all kind of artists, and like I'm an artist, but like I'm narcissistic, and he's very like self-referential and stuff, while also critiquing things. And so I think one of the things that is true, and I feel like is more common now, is that idea in the postmodern context, everything is meaningless, but like, where do I find meaning? But like, everything is messed up, but like, I need to do something about it. But even if I do something about it, there's no hope after that. And I think that's the dangerous cycle that I feel like our culture is locked in right now, and is having like a weird battle with like, I honestly think the James Gunn thing is kind of a postmodern crisis, and like the Dan Harmon thing specifically, because you have jokes that are offensive, like, and not that they're the first offensive jokes to ever be said, but there is this mentality that we're in now where it's like, well, you have wronged, because nothing matters, you've kind of wasted your chance, so like, you're done, like you're out of the game, like this is it. Versus the idea of like, I think what the video did really well in its analysis of Burnham's evolution is that he kind of went from like a very staunch postmodernist to like a sort of what they called a postmodernist, where yes, we can be self-referential and critical and even downright angry at the past and really bad things that were just bought hook, line, and sinker and injected into how our culture operated. But we can also look forward and have hope of like, well, now we're acknowledging these things so we can make them better because we know about it,
and not wallow in the dirt.
Exactly, versus everyone just being mad because it's like, well, this isn't real and this doesn't matter and nothing matters and and just kind of being miserable. So I do feel like I have noticed that there's a shift in more comedies to just be like, it's just like misery, like everything just seems miserable. Like it's I don't know what it is. I don't know if you disagree. I would actually really love to hear, because granted, I think I'm also really jaded from just how everything's been shaking out with like Twitter and how people handle all that.
I think it's had its good and its bad sides. Like I personally, postmodernism is one of those things where I like have a love-hate relationship with it, because I love the idea of, the punk part of me loves the idea of destroying established things to some extent. So I like the idea of people doing whatever the heck they want with comedy, to some extent. Like it's this thing of like, just because you don't find it funny doesn't mean it's not funny to people. Like there's people who don't find Bill Burr funny. There's people who don't find Ricky Gervais funny. There's people who don't find Rick and Morty funny. But like, I find it funny. So does that mean it's not funny? Does that mean I'm dumb? Like, does that mean I don't have too high of an IQ? And I think that's what it's done, is it's just anything goes, which is the ironic part about the James Gunn thing, is that anything doesn't go to some extent. But in that context, Disney has their butt in the line, so they're just like, we don't want to be associated with anything even remotely related to pedophilia.
Right.
Which, but I don't want to get into the politics of it, because it's just so ironic that the alt-writers who like pointed this out are the ones who are like going after this now, even though they're the ones who are always on about free speech.
And I think,
but I think what postmodernism, whatever that means, we haven't defined that. But I don't feel like defining that, because I think it's just basically, in my mind, postmodernism is like the anything goes mentality to some extent, because I think modernism was this like broad sweeping narratives about things like established authority structures and stuff like the Catholic Church and whatever else you want to say was like, or like the established comedic thing, which I think you see now with Netflix and YouTube and all these things. Like, people can make stuff that they want to make without being beholden to networks and different things. And like, that was a thing Bill Burr was saying in that one video, like, I don't have to be, I can say whatever the heck I want now because Netflix just gives me money and I go out and do it. Like, and like Dave Chappelle's been in controversy and all this stuff, but it's like Netflix allows comedians the freedom to actually tell the jokes they want to tell. Whereas like in the past with Ray Romano and Jerry Seinfeld and all these people, like they could only say things to a certain extent because the network told them like, you can't say that. And so like, it's almost like, I feel like comedians have always been the way that comedians are now. Yeah. It's just that they were beholden to
I think that's
authority structures that like Bo Burnham, like he came up on YouTube. He was a YouTube sensation. And like, there's plenty of people who are doing comedy on YouTube that is just like, you wouldn't be able to do that on TV.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's changing it is both like the attitude, but I think more so than the attitude is just the tools that we have at our disposal now that allow people to do whatever they want out of that. So,
sure. Yeah.
Which I think is changing comedy more than any sort of cultural narrative, because I think comedians have always been this way, like self-deprecating and pessimistic. Yeah. It's just that they couldn't say what they wanted to say because of the established structure of the system.
When it's funny, because like if you go back and you watch like early Eddie Murphy stand up, or you watch Steve Martin and some of these other guys, and it's kind of like, Steve Martin, cheaper by the dozen, like, he played Jacques Cousteau, but when you like watch their stand up, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is not
family
PG
friendly,
friendly stand up, like, and so I do think in a weird way there were these established criteria of like what is good, and I do agree with that. I think there's part of postmodernism in terms of, I think what postmodernism did that is beneficial is that it made it untaboo. It removed the taboo of like asking questions of solidified structures.
Yep.
That a lot of which I think did need to be questioned. However, this is where I get kind of pissy towards the postmodern attitude, is then all of a sudden everyone gets mad when they start saying this narrative of like, everything gets questioned, everything needs to get taken down, everything needs to get redone, and then something they care about starts and like, whoa, no, that's sacred, you can't do that, and you're like, we're either all playing the game or we're not. Like, which is it going to be? Or we're not in a postmodern society anymore, and we need to move forward and realize that not everything needs to be dismantled and taken down. Maybe some things just need to be slightly changed, and that's okay. So,
yeah,
I think in terms of tying comedy into that too, I think we've seen the rise of social media in the past like 2 decades, and I think that's a huge contributing factor to how things have shaked out. And as I do agree that I think it's good that postmodernism has allowed, or just having a structure that is more open to people being and telling certain kinds of jokes, I think is okay. I think the situations, and we kind of alluded to it, and I don't want to talk about these situations like politically, because I know the James Gunn thing started politically, and I'm concerned about like that. Like, again, like to my point, it's like you have all these alt-righters, like the left would have done that to someone who's predominant, like, The Last Man Standing, like Tim Allen's show, which is a more conservative show, like that got shut down. So it's like, and there was like very clear people who were like, well, it's just an alt-right show. And it's like, no, it's not. But then you have the alt-righters who go and they're like, well, he's just a crazy blow. And it's, stop it. Just stop it. Like, enough with this. And so specifically with the James Gunn thing and the Dan Harmon thing. And I read up on the Dan Harmon thing that resurfaced
I didn't really
again
see
recently.
What that was about.
It was pretty messed up. Essentially it was him not just like doing one of those like, oh, show me on the doll where they touched you kind of like inappropriate pedophilia jokes. It was like he actually like physically had intercourse with a baby doll or something like that. So it was something where it was like, that's not funny. Like, are you stupid? Like, how dumb are you? Like,
yeah.
I'm being provocative. That's not being like, I don't care. Like,
I mean, it is provocative.
It is, but like at one point it's like, yeah, that's provocative. Like, for what gain? Like, that
I think
doesn't...
it's tough too because of like the culture of Hollywood. Like, people know
that specifically,
that there's rampant pedophilia going on in Hollywood, and so like even just making jokes about that is a little uncomfortable because you're like, how am I supposed to know whether you're joking or not?
Right.
Like just because you say it's a joke, like maybe some other actual pedophile says
exactly.
it's a joke. I don't know.
Well, I mean, people were saying stuff about Harvey Weinstein for years. I mean, like,
people were making jokes about it.
Yeah. There was I was watching 30 Rock and that happened. Like, there's a joke where it was like, and I mean, that was in like the early 2000s, like 2006. I think I checked the date of like when that episode aired. And it was like Jenna Maroney, like that character is like, oh, like it was like that time I was at this one party and Harvey Weinstein did this to me. And it was like,
you're like, oh, frick.
that was a decade ago. Like, how have you people not said something or done something like that? It's just weird. It's weird. And I hate, and I think I'm aggravated and I'm like getting riled up because I'm totally for, like, I think of, like, I watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and, like, I've been watching it, and, like, some of the stuff that they do and talk about in that show is, like, it's so bad. But I think what they do, and in a weird way, it kind of mirrors our discussion with The Punisher, is, like, when I watch The Punisher, I don't go out and think, like, haha, being provocatively violent is okay, and it's cool. It's more like, wow, that's a mirror to be like, that is not okay, that's not good stuff. And I feel like watching Always Sunny, that's kind of the same response I have, is you're supposed to know that these people are so detestable that everyone in the world that is not in the inner circle of Frank, D, Charlie, and Mac, between those four, that like those four are the only people who can actually stomach those four people. Yeah. And the rest of the world is like, you're all insane. Like, we can't. And so, yes, it's terrible to laugh like when they make certain jokes about things or whatever, but there is a point of like, and it is terrible, and we are saying it's terrible. Whereas with the Dan Harmon thing and the I went through and I don't know if you read the
I read
tweets
some.
that
the one
James
about
Gunn
the giving
said?
tree. Did you see that one?
Yeah,
Yee.
it was like, dude,
yeah,
like, you know, I'm sorry, like back then, and this is where.
Also, back then, 10 years ago, he was still like 40 something, I think.
Right.
So I was like, I mean, it's the difference between 18 and 28 versus like 46 and 56.
Exactly.
Like, you were still like a full grown adult.
It's like, you're a grown man. Like, you know better. So that is one. I don't know if he should have gotten fired, and I'm going to be real pissed if the new Guardians movie sucks, to be honest. But
it's one of those things where I'm just like, if it really was a joke, then I'm fine with it. Because I think.
And that's, I think, the question.
So, like, I want to be a free speech absolutist in that sense. Like, you should be able to say whatever you want to say. But the argument they were making, the argument I saw somebody make was, if we can't make racist jokes, then you can't make pedophilia jokes. Like, that's what people were saying. And that kind of made me think like, I can't argue with that, I guess. Like, if we're gonna pick sides about what you can and can't make jokes about, then I mean, I can't blame them for getting mad about it. Because pedophilia jokes are pretty messed up.
Right.
Like, I would never laugh at a pedophilia joke.
Well, I do think, like, there are some that, I mean, like, I just, like, literally, one of the early first seasons of Philly is, there's that coach from their high school, who, like, those two weird brothers, like, come out and say that, like, molested them. And so, like, the whole thing is a giant joke about that, but it ends up being that it's like they fabricated it because they wanted to win money from their case, and it turns out that like they're really creepy and like they do horribly weird stuff, and and then like Mac's mad because like he didn't want to do that to him, and so that whole thing is like, it is a joke and it's making fun of like pedophilia in a way, but I think it's in a way that it isn't like graphic, and I think there's a difference between and.
It's also doing it in a way that acknowledges that pedophilia is a terrible thing.
Correct.
It's just doing it in a way that establishes Mac as being a terrible person. Like,
correct.
Only a terrible person would want to
actually like think about that in that way.
Yeah.
And so not to say like, oh yeah, so racist jokes are okay, but I think there's a difference between like, I get really uncomfortable when people make like jokes about the Holocaust. I think because there is a specific, not like Hitler jokes, but like things where like that Green Room I was watching, like there was a joke that one of the guys was saying where, you know, it's like, oh, like the only thing worse you could have done was if you like made, it was Roseanne. Like Roseanne actually was the one who had a photo of it where she got in trouble, where it was all funny, and they brought it up, and it's her dressed as Hitler.
Oh gosh.
And she had, it's like, all right, and just public disclaimer, we're listing these examples. We don't agree all the time with what these people do or say. We're using them because they're just apropos. But she has a cookie sheet with gingerbread,
yeah.
and she's explaining it, and she's like, yeah, it's like, here's me dressed as Hitler, blah blah blah, and they're all laughing because it's like, ha, you actually look like him, and she's like, yeah, and here are my like ginger Jews, and everyone's like, are you serious? Like, oh my, like, she's like, yeah, I kind of got in some hot water for that, and like that one made me really uncomfortable. Like that was one of those where it's like I smirked, but it was like, that's just so messed. That's just so messed up. Like, that's not.
I think in a circumstance like that, it's like, yes, to that person it was a joke, and maybe to some people it's funny, but the joke, like, there's no other way to argue it. Like, the joke is clearly motivated by some sort of like anti-Semitism. I feel like how do you can't make that joke without, like, what is even funny about that circumstance other than the fact that you're cooking Jews in an oven?
Right,
like,
you're replicating it in a like a funny
scenario.
Like that's
if you could argue that it was distanced from it and like was making commentary, but also not condoning it. But like the funny part about that, the quote unquote funny part about that, is you're dressed as Hitler cooking Jews in the oven. Like,
right.
That's the only reason it's funny, and it's not funny because it's like it's anti-Semitic.
It's terrible. Yeah, and it's just horrible.
It's one of those, and it's just like, sure, you like in free speech society, yeah, you can say that, but people don't have to like it.
And people, I think, do have the right to be upset, and I know I'm kind of, the reason I'm going down this trail and I'm committing to it is because I do know Mark specifically asked about, you know, kind of the culture of, you know, being easily offended and stuff like that. And again,
I think there's that's the thing, is there's no distinction between a benign joke that's offensive and something that's actually offensive. Like,
I would agree.
And that, like, Ricky Gervais's new special is all about that. Basically, him just like, he basically just, the whole thing is about him explaining his jokes. Like, all right, people, you don't get it. Like, this is why it's this way and this way. And it's kind of like his token saying is like, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. And I think it's like, it's this culture of like, I can't even, it's hard to describe. Like, it's just, you can't say anything. And like, they're using the Roseanne example as like justifying the James Gunn thing, but the James Gunn thing happened 10 years ago. Roseanne said this like a week ago.
Right.
Like, her tweet was like a week ago. And so it's like, there's no, I think because of the postmodern thing, there's no like concept of like,
what is right,
reality? What is reality? What like, where is the line between like a joke and something that's offensive? Because jokes are always offensive to somebody.
Right.
Like,
I mean, like, you know, I mean, just pointing to us, like, we make diabetic jokes all the time, but we also know that, like, I would never joke about, I think there's a difference between being like, haha, you can't eat a donut versus like, haha, you could die tomorrow. Like, I feel like there's a line.
Well, even that I joke about.
Well, I mean, hey, I would never do
I joke about like, man, this could kill me.
Yeah, or it's like my finger might fall off, you know.
Or like somebody offers me a candy bar and I'll be like, you trying to kill me?
Yeah. But I mean, like, but there's
it makes
a
people
level
uncomfortable.
But I mean, gosh, this is so hard because I know like we're speaking in really distinct phrases of like, yeah, this is okay and this is not okay. But I also know that there's absolutely a right for people to be skeptical of all things of like, well, it's okay to joke about diabetes because it's like, you know, what are you gonna do? Like, for you, it might be easy but then for someone else who really has this like a heightened level, they might be more sensitive to it. However, here's where I feel about the sensitivity thing with comedy. I think it's a very scary world when comedians have to be afraid to an extent to what they say, but I do not see any issue with like holding Dan Harmon or like James Gunn accountable for those kinds of jokes. Like I don't see, and I don't necessarily think that holding accountable means like firing in this situation, because that, gosh, I'm trying not to talk like Twitter. Like Twitter just goes, well, that was fine, it's not a big deal. No, it's complicated. Like the James Gunn thing.
Twitter's a terrible place.
Exactly. It's like
the fun.
James Gunn thing was 10 years ago. That I have a huge issue with, that some D-bag over at some clearly biased article dug up all this stuff about him and was like, look at this guy who makes your movies and your Hollywood propaganda. Like, that's messed up. That's just as messed up to me in a way of like, you are maliciously seeking out someone's past that they have clearly come out and said that they're sorry for.
That's the thing too, is like, it depends what the intent is behind it, because like, I don't want to say the guy's name, but he's clearly a bad actor, they call it in this situation. Like, he's not doing this because of pedophilia. He's doing this because James Gunn said something about Trump.
Right.
Like, there's no good intent there. Like, you're just politically motivated. Like, this is dumb. And I mean, people do it on the left all the time, but that doesn't make it right.
Exactly.
It's just stupid. Like,
right. And that's the thing that I'm getting tired of too, gosh, the James Gunn thing was, in the past, he acknowledged it, and the only reason it's coming to light now is because someone dug it up and maliciously was using those past remarks and saying like, see, look at this, and everyone, and Disney was like, all right, axed. And I think that's stupid. And I think the reason being, if he hadn't and he had stuck by them and said like, those are totally fine, like, no, I would say worse stuff than this today, then we have an issue. But he clearly, and like reading his statements, I mean, we're giving him the benefit of a doubt.
A couple years ago, he said like he doesn't stand by this stuff,
right?
So like, he's been saying it, like,
right. And this is where the mind games that people play in the comment section of, well, it's totally real. Have you read what he said? Like, he's totally.
What's the statute of limitation on people's statements?
Yeah, he's like totally a pedophile and all this stuff. It's like, you can't prove that, so stop saying that. Like, that's a really inflammatory. That'd be like if I heard you say like, some very benign, like more racially insensitive joke, and I'm like, you have a prejudice towards these people and you hate them and you want them all to die. Like, it's like, no, I don't think that. I made a joke about, this race and this stereotype. It's like, nope, you hate them. Nope, you hate them. I know your intent. It's like, stop. Just stop being offended. That was cool. Stop being offended. But also, and I think to pull it back to the postmodern dilemma, this is the part that I just find so ironic, is postmodernists are the ones who are so against, like vehemently against the idea of an absolute truth, which is funny.
Except if it's their
unless it's their absolute truth, because then their absolute truth is just the general truth that there is no absolute truth, and it's just but I just find it funny that all of a sudden, in the midst of like, what feels like the peak of postmodernist ideology and everything goes and you can do whatever and bunk to what people say, all of a sudden there's these people who have been raised in that perspective and in that mode, and especially comedians, and again, tying it to comedians, and it side applies to everyone else too. You have people who are like, I can just say whatever. I can take a picture of me dressed as Hitler, like with, gingerbread cookies dressed as like Jewish people. Like, that's fine. But now there's now all of a sudden people are saying like, hey, that crossed the line. We live in a postmodern society, pal. Is there a line or isn't there? And then who gets to decide where the line is? Yeah. So you have millions of people on the Twitter sphere and Facebook and Instagram, not Instagram. They're all just taking selfies and like, what does the world mean anyway? But you have all this stuff, and I just find it so funny how many people have come out of the woodwork to say with the James Gunn thing or the Dan Harmon thing or the Roseanne thing, or calling out Johnny Depp. I saw that all the time. Or like, well, Disney will fire this person but not this person, and like, all of a sudden there's a line, and everybody has a line, and everyone's line is different, and now no one agrees on anything because none of our lines align. It's like, you're all dumb. Like, you're playing the game.
Is there a line or isn't there a line?
Is there a line or is there not a line?
Yeah.
And who gets to decide where the line is? And maybe there is an absolute of where the line should be.
Yeah.
Or maybe there is a healthy parameter instead of like being, because I feel like the modernist was like, line, you are on it. Not, no, you're not over there. You're not over there. You are on the line. And I feel like postmodernism was so hard of just like, we're just going to shred it away, that now it's like, okay.
But now
like,
everybody has an individual
exactly.
line.
Where I feel like,
and social media has amplified voices that should not
gosh.
have a voice.
It's like, well, everyone has a voice now. It's like, there are some idiots out there.
Yeah.
Like, idiots.
Yeah.
Like, you just...
Like, the I try to avoid it, but sometimes it's just fun to watch things burn. Like, just the Twitter comment section on anything, any possible post you could find. Like,
it's
the most nice thing in the world, somebody will figure out a way of tearing that person to the ground and making them feel like a pile of garbage.
It's like, hey,
why? Where did you come from? Why are you here?
This is my pug Snuggles, and we're just having a great day at the beach. Is he a rescue?
Yeah.
If he's not a rescue, then he's a worthless dog. There's thousands of dogs who are gonna be like killed this year because you didn't give me. It's just
basically,
like, wow, like relax, it's okay. And all that to say, I feel like we haven't gotten to get like angry in a while, so I feel like I'm getting all.
I think it frustrates me because like the reason comedy is so funny is because it's like offensive in some
edgy,
way.
yeah.
I think it's edgy, like, and not in like a teenage edgy way, but like it points out things in society that are wrong, that are crazy, that like they're basically saying the things that everybody else wishes they would say, and that's why we all laugh because we're like, ha, that's true. And like that's why sitcoms work, because like we can relate to these terrible people in some ways and kind of see ourselves. Like Seinfeld, they're all reprehensible people, but like I see a little bit of George in me sometimes. But that doesn't mean I am George. It doesn't mean I am like these terrible people. But like it's a representation of small parts of society that kind of show us, like basically say things that we have been saying all along.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be political. It could be social. It could be anything. Like, I think when comedy is safe, it's just bad. Like a lot of the SNL skits I see are just bad. Like it's just not funny to me. Like it just feels like, I don't know. Like I don't know how to describe it. Or like,
no, you're absolutely
and there's
right.
some that are really funny. I'm just like, wow, SNL's still good. Or like late night, like. There's some late night things that like Conan is always funny to me, or like even, but a lot of it is just like pandering. Like it's just weird. It's safe.
You want to hear a joke about Trump?
Yeah. It's like everything is just about Trump now. I'm like, what happened to comedy? Like
exactly.
And I get that they feel they have a place to like call out Trump or whatever, but at the same time, like I feel like they're sacrificing so much of what comedy is. In some extent.
Yeah.
Which is why I like the postmodern aspects, because have you ever seen Between Two Ferns?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Like you get stuff like that where it's like it's just making fun of
so good
late night and stuff, and how like pandery it is and how like safe it is. And I think like certain aspects of comedy are fine. I think like a lot of comedians, even like Ricky Gervais, is always complaining about how people are telling him what he can and can't say, but like he still goes on saying whatever the heck he wants with no repercussions. And a lot of comedians are like that. Like Bill Burr is fine. Like a lot of comedians are fine. I think it's affecting more like up and coming comedians who are trying to like make it. But yeah, I think like when comedy's too safe, it's just bad.
Oh, 100%.
I think you need to offend some people.
Yeah, and
you need to like in the right way. I think like because in his special, Ricky Gervais explains like I forget what terms he uses, but like there's a difference between like the object and the subject of the joke. Like the subject of the joke could be like about trans people, but like trans people aren't the object of the joke, like object of the humor. Like we're making fun of them. We're just using the circumstance or whatever, or like kind of like basically like if you aren't capable of like critically thinking about things very well, then you're going to be very easily offended about things because you're not seeing what the joke is actually trying to say, sort of, which is what comedy is. It's making comments about things. So
yeah, and
know.
Again, I think this is where I just get so irritated and I just can't deal with how our culture and our world talks about really complex stuff is when everyone's functioning on their own line is right, there's just no rationale to just like sit and just pause and be like, okay, this is where I think the line is, but I'm going to hear and like confirm that this is where the line should be. Mm-hmm. And I think to me, if people more collectively do that, even in this like quote unquote postmodern situation with some of these more complex things, again, with that whole range idea, people kind of start stepping into the range. It's like, you know what? Yeah. I don't fully 100% agree to like where your line is, but I get it. Like, but I can see that. And you know what? You've actually brought me a little over this way. So I'm kind of in this thing. And
yeah, I think moving on to his question about how this will change, I think like it all comes down to social media. I think like the problem is, especially like Twitter and stuff, like it fuels like the fury in people's veins. Like it gives credence to their thoughts and their feelings, and like, oh, people like this. Like I need to like show people that I'm like virtuous,
so virtuous,
and whatever. And I think like if you just talk to people, if you just look at people, like most of them are just like, yeah, whatever. Like I didn't think it was funny, but like they're not running around like perpetually outraged about things. Or like you ask them and like, oh yeah, I don't really watch him because I read this article and whatever. Like, I heard he was offensive. Like, okay, that's fine. But it's like, I feel like most people are capable of thinking critically about these things, and you just get the idiots on Twitter who are like causing all the problems.
Yeah.
And I think it's literally just like social media is fueling this fire of incendiary, divisive opinions. Whereas in the real world, like where people are just doing things and listening to things, like I feel like things are fine. And I think the way that it's changing, especially, is reinforcing the idea that comedy needs other avenues. Like YouTube is becoming a lot more popular. You're just getting things like H3H3. Like it's not traditional comedy, but like it's funny in its own right because of the personality they put behind it and the reacting. And
I was just watching Content Cop, so I'm just
and like iDubbbz and different ways of doing comedy that are non-traditional. And Netflix is huge now. Like they're buying like every comedian in existence, basically, like getting special after special after special, and letting people just say whatever the heck they want. And so I think like on one hand, like it's scary, but on another hand, I feel like comedy has survived this far. I think it's going to keep on surviving. And I mean, like you said, that threshold might get smaller a little bit, but I think there's always going to be people continuing to push it back. It's kind of like a give and take between what is and isn't acceptable. And I think there's always people on the forefront pushing that acceptability a little bit further than it should go.
Yeah.
And so I think in some respects, yeah, I feel like comedy's fine.
Yeah, it's always, everything was always fine. And everything always, again, like you were saying, like social media is...
It makes everything seem like the world is on fire. Like,
there's probably one person who's like... And like that's the sound of how loud they're talking, but like with Twitter, it's like, oh my gosh, like you know, everyone's just like, it just makes it seem so much worse. But to your point, I think that's really interesting, and I wonder if, and just kind of backpedaling a little bit to the idea of like, you know, is our over offensive culture and like, oh, we get offended about everything. I do think it's a problem. I think it's a huge problem. I think people cannot take things as a joke. And I think this is, again, the problem is that's the Twitter response I see. Someone says something like mean or like jokingly mean or like a joke that's more hostile or negative. And they just say like, and someone's like, that's offensive. You can't say that, you piece of crap. And then someone under it's like, geez, chill out, take a joke. What I feel like is a normal response, and what should be a normal response, even if you hedge more one way or the other, is like, wow, that Roseanne picture of her as Hitler is terrible. Am I going to go beat down her door and like scream at her? Like, no, she's a terrible person, whatever. Like, you just kind of move on. You just let it go. What I feel like is so problem is someone sees like a wrong or something, and it's like, we've built up this virtue signaling culture so intently that if we see one person who says something that's slightly off cover, no, you can't say that. We got to correct you. No, you can't say that. That's offensive. You can't do that.
Yeah, we're trying to like whitewash society. Everything needs to be squeaky clean, and
it's like, I do understand that if someone says something that is like damaging or like makes you feel offended, don't talk to them about it. They just made fun of you. Like, talk to someone who like loves you and cares about you. Like, that to me is what's so funny is like they don't complain to someone who's like, hey, I just really need encouragement because like, you know, I saw this joke and I know they're just goofing. They think they're being funny, but like that really hurt me. There's no authenticity like that. It's like, holy crap, you piece of blah, 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 and you're this and blah, 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 and I hope this happens to you. And it's just like this volatility that just shoots out of people's brains faster than they can process it to realize, like, I maybe shouldn't yell things at this guy who literally just made fun of me. Like,
yeah.
He may take what I'm just saying now and make me look even more stupid.
Which is exactly what Ricky Gervais does. He literally like tweets the people with like 0 followers and like responds to them and stuff.
Well, but that's the thing is it's like, I'm glad
which is
that
even
people,
more funny because
exactly.
like he's exposing the idea that these people think their voices matter, and then he in some ways makes it matter by like responding to them. But it's always just like a really comedic, witty like response, and he's like, "Your voice, like I don't care what you say."
And it's again, it's complicated, and it's. I feel like I tend to be on the more empathetic side. That, you know, like having been made fun of or like teased when I was growing up, like yeah, like jokes, like quote unquote jokes do hurt, or like jokes can be malicious. But I think there's a difference between like jokes being malicious and having to just grow up and be like, they're gonna make fun of my weight because that's easy. Like like say something new, or like they're gonna make fun of my hair, or they're gonna make fun of my nose, or they're gonna make fun of how I talk,
like,
or
that
my
comes
accent.
back to the object versus the subject of
Exactly.
the joke. Like you were the object of the joke, which is offensive to you because like they're intentionally making fun of you.
But then
which is like comedy, but at the cost of what?
To the continued extent, I do look back and I do take value, like that growing from pain of like, it was good for me. Like I needed to stiffen up a little bit and to grow up. And there were things that now like I don't care as much when people joke with me, or I'm able to joke back. And I've learned to see like, who are the people who are going to try and jab at me because that's just their sense of humor, and who are the people who are going to be more like, haha, let's joke about this thing over here. And you can kind of play with both of them because you don't, you're not the person who's like, ha, I have to tear everyone down because that's what I think is funny. But you also don't have to be like, the weather's cold again today, so I don't know. Oh, I just wish I could take Twitter and just like,
yeah, I think social media makes things seem way worse than they are.
Yeah.
And I think it escalates on both sides. I agree with you. I tend to be more empathetic when it comes to people being offended about things. Like our highly sensitive culture ticks me off, but at the same time, I'm empathetic with those people because of the system that we've grown up in. Like,
yeah,
we have grown up in weird authority structures and people telling us not to ask questions, and not even directly, but it's just like this culture of like, don't question things because this is how the way things are. And I'm like, but why are they this way? Why do they have to be this way? And I think a lot of people our age are doing that now, and sometimes it's frustrating because of whatever, but I think things will be fine. I think social media is just, I don't know, man.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Conan, I don't know. What do I know? Just a kid from Boston.
Yeah, I think all that to say, I love comedy.
Oh, yeah. Dude, a good Adam Sandler movie.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Jim Gaffigan?
Oh, I love Jim Gaffigan.
He has a new special called Noble Ape, which is pretty funny. Cause
I'll have to go check it out.
It's interesting because his wife just had like a huge brain tumor.
Wow.
And he's like talking about it, and the whole special is of him making fun of all this like hospital stuff and whatever. And I love his style because he does that voice like, why is he talking about dentists so much? And like he kind of like internalizes the hecklers and of people getting offended. Like he knows exactly when he's offending people, and he like internalizes that to some extent, which is funny because he's probably one of like the cleaner comedians out there. Mm-hmm. Like he's not very offensive, but he acknowledges that respect. Yeah. Which I really appreciate about him. I like his comedy.
Yeah. I think this is kind of my closing thought, and I think it's just the idea of comedy in general. I think people take jokes way too seriously. And I kind of see it this way, and I feel like our culture has no idea how to handle temper tantrums or attention seeking, and I think we always look for things that we think are like very clear examples of attention seeking or temper tantrums, and it's like, oh, we need to shut that down. But like when James Gunn says like a terrible thing about, like, it makes a horribly offensive pedophilia joke, I don't know if that's what he actually thinks. I think I hold his humanity high enough regard that I don't think he's that stupid on a social media platform that big with that kind of audience to then do it. Maybe he is or whatever, but
that's the thing is, like, I can't even like internalize the level of anger these people seem to be displaying. Like,
yes,
I can't even imagine like seeing a tweet like that and being that angry about anything. Like, I mean, we're clearly angry about this. We're clearly like angry about this situation, but like, I can't imagine like seeing a joke somebody made.
I'm gonna ruin their life.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make sure like, they never get another job again.
Yeah, it's like, it's offensive, but like, what am I supposed to do about it?
Well, like, what does it do to me? Well, it's hurting somebody else. Well, like, what does it get? What should they do? Like, help them then.
Yeah.
Like, don't ruin someone's life.
Yeah.
Or if they're that, see, like, I think that's the attitude. If someone is that dumb or that awful, this is just from the 24 years that I've lived, this has been my perception. The people who make a mistake tend to grow, and people tend to gravitate towards them eventually. The people who stay the same, who suck, continue to suck and continue to drift apart from every human being around them because people catch on to their crap. And so to me, it's like, well, he's terrible and he's ruining people's lives. It's like, if there is someone out there in the reverse psychology, well, that was offensive, that made someone feel really bad. If they are that hurt by some random director who lives thousands of miles away and whose whole job is to make fake things and alien movies and stuff like that, if you are that offended by what he said, I don't know what to do with you.
Go see a therapist.
Just calm down. Like, if he came to your house and said that to your face, I don't know, punch him. Like,
well, that's the thing is, people's reactions are equated to as if he actually did that thing to them.
Right.
Like, this is how people react when these things happen to them, not when some random guy says a thing 10 years ago. Like, this isn't, like, it's almost like just the level of reaction isn't appropriate to what is happening. It's just,
it's bananas. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I need to just let it go because
I think it's going to go away.
I
think postmodernism, this idea, and like you said, everybody's got their own line. I think we're starting to get to the point where we acknowledge the fact that we have our own line. And I think people are coming around to the idea that, like, we can still question authority and question things while still having some sort of understanding that we need to have some sort of structure and authority in society to exist together. And I think that's what's happening right now is nobody knows where the line is. Nobody wants to acknowledge there's a line, but I think people are starting to acknowledge, like, okay, there's a sensible middle here where we can, like, come to conclusions about things like human beings and adults.
Yeah.
Sort of.
We're just not mature enough to handle anything that's complex, which is just so funny to me because then we think that we have the answer to all the world's issues in 240 characters. Like, are you dumb? Like, enough with this. With this. Yeah, I know how to answer this person back so bad.
They talk with such authority too. Yeah. And it's just like back and forth. I'm like, I can't even visualize myself being in this situation, like vehemently responding to somebody like this. Like, after the first response, I would just not respond because it's like, okay, this is going nowhere.
You know what? I feel like this is like an accurate comparison. Like, whenever I read through a Twitter comment feed, I feel like I'm watching the Wives of like West Hollywood or something. It's those moments where it's like something big happens and all the cuts and it's like all these people who aren't involved just like side-eyeing this person, and the one person's like, honey, you best take that back. And she's like, what if I don't? And she's like, what if you do? And then they go on this whole tirade where they're just yelling and screaming, and then all of a sudden, like, someone's punching someone, and then the producer's running on the stage, and they like cut to that one guy, and he's like, they're crazy. Like, that's like what it feels like.
Yeah.
There's no reason, there's no rationale. So
I think to wrap all this up, going to question 5, I think comedians can push boundaries without getting fired, but I also think people getting fired for jokes they made isn't inherently wrong because, again, it goes back to the authority structure thing. Like,
yes,
Disney has a right to decide who and what people that work for them can say. Mm-hmm. And Disney obviously doesn't want to be associated with anything related to pedophilia, considering the nature of their
business.
Company.
Right, exactly.
And so, like, I don't blame the company.
Oh, not at all.
And I think, like, I don't like the trend of just getting people fired because you're mad at them or at something they said. But I also think there's, like people always say, there's consequences for speech. That doesn't mean you don't have free speech. It just means, like, there's consequences for the things you say. Like, I can't just go to work and start saying racist things. Like, they have a right to fire me for something like that. And so, like, I think comedians can and should push boundaries, but there's also consequences to some extent for that, which is the beauty of Netflix and Amazon and all these places opening up the doors for things to come about. And I think that's why Netflix is so hugely popular now, because comedians aren't touring as much because college campuses are travesty. Like, Jerry Seinfeld barely goes to college campuses anymore.
I saw a video where Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld refused to go to schools anymore. And I saw an interview with him.
I saw Jerry in Madison, so I'm guessing he's probably changed that now.
At the Kohl Center?
No, it was at the, what's that nice theater called?
Overture?
Overture, yeah. I was at the
See,
Overture.
that's different. Like, to me, that's a public space. That's not like...
It's like an art center, not like a college.
Right. Like if he came down to, like, the Union or something, like, I think that's different. Like, could you imagine, dude?
Oh.
But it's interesting. Like, Gloria and I saw Kevin Hart, and I'll let you wrap up. We saw Kevin Hart here. Gosh, it was our senior year.
He was at the Kohl Center.
Yeah, he was at the Kohl Center. It was awesome. It was really,
it was like $100
he was
bucks,
so
wasn't
funny.
It?
Yeah, she was great and got us tickets. But he was so funny. But it was really interesting because the opening acts, there were like three guys that came before Kevin Hart, and some of the stuff that they talked about, like, people booed, like very loudly, like people booed them. And like there's a lot of like homophobic jokes and things like that, and it was very interesting because you could just see that, like, people were upset and, like, very upset, and I was not surprised if I was going to start seeing people leave. I don't think I saw, like, any mass amount of people who did, but
I think people know Kevin Hart's material.
Exactly. Yeah,
it does kind of sully his
name
a little bit.
Yeah, and it's like I think it's one of those things where, like, again, should they be allowed to joke about what they joked about? Absolutely, because I guarantee you, if they would have gone to a certain group of people, and I don't even think, like, like, oh, out in the country, like, white Nebraska, and they're making jokes about this, and like, yeah, all those city folk, but I think with, they're talking about something real to them, and, like, they're processing it, and they're doing it through the art of comedy. And so I do think they should be allowed to say that. I do also completely give credence to the crowd in the city that you're in. If you're that dense that you don't know the crowd that you're in, and you're like, what are you booing for? You're like, you're an idiot. Like, but I don't know. It's weird. Everything.
And I think there's a difference between one heckler, because that's always the thing, is like, it's just one person complaining and then everybody jumps on board. But if it's the entire crowd that's like, boo, then you're doing something wrong. Like,
right.
You don't know the crowd, basically. Yeah.
Life is complicated. Stop acting on Twitter as if it isn't.
Yeah. And he said, or receiving death threats, which, I mean, how you
shouldn't
stop
do that to
like,
anybody.
I feel like if you're going into a job like comedy and you're expecting nobody to do that, like, people are idiots. Like, everybody gets death threats nowadays. It's sad, but it's just like, I don't know. I feel like it's not going to stop.
Well, again,
it's like the extreme incendiary nature of things.
When again, I think, and I'm, man, dude, I'm fearful. Like, I'm fearful where stuff is going, because it's not necessarily like, oh, like all of a sudden people are gonna start killing people, but there is a point in me where when you start making stuff like that okay, because, well, your subjective truth, and I can do that because I can do whatever I want, people eventually start saying, well, we have to step in. And every time anybody receives a death threat, we got to trace their IP address and we got to go cuff that person. And all of a sudden you get someone who, like, now you're putting the definition of what's not okay to say comedy wise in the hands of someone who can arrest you and put you in jail or do these things. And, like, I don't want to go down that road. So, like, just people stop being D-bags. Like, just,
yeah. I think that's the thing is, like, everybody keeps acting like this is a free speech issue. And I don't think it is, because the government's not getting involved in any of this. There's no, like, the government's not telling us what we can and can't say about things. And I mean, if it's like a college campus that's funded by the government that's telling you what you can and can't do or say, then that's a whole different thing. But if comedians are just being shut down by the public, I mean, that's kind of like the free market. Like, the consumers are deciding that they don't like what you got to say. Like, it's kind of, and I mean, in some ways, social media amplifies a smaller amount of voices and making it seem larger and bringing it to companies' attentions and stuff. But still, that's the culture of the networked world. Like, you say something offensive, they don't want to be associated with you anymore. Which, again, comes down to, well, find a different avenue to get your comedy out there.
Well, and also understand that you are held accountable for what you say. And if you're in a position and you know you're in a position to say whatever you want, go for it. You're probably not going to reap any consequence. But if you're working for Disney, who is a predominantly child-focused company...
And that's the thing, too, is Disney had to have known about those tweets. Disney doesn't hire somebody and not know about the person's past.
And that's the thing.
So just because other people know about it now they're like...
Yeah, and they're like, it's like, oh, shoot, it got out. So,
yeah.
Dude...
He should have just deleted his tweets.
Yeah.
One more Ryan Johnson, he deleted like 20,000 tweets after this whole thing happened. Yeah. So...
I'm just waiting for those to pop up. That'll be...
Ooh. Yeah, I feel like if you got anything bad out there, people just delete your crap. Like, if it was 10 years ago, like, just delete your tweets.
Or better yet, as you're deleting your tweets...
Or create a new account.
Right. But honestly, though, if you are that person who's going back in 10 years and deleting all your tweets, contemplate the fact that you posted this to who could eventually be the world on this platform. And if you're like, ooh, I shouldn't have said this, like, duh, like, that's a problem. Like, you shouldn't. It's just lunatic. There are days that I just want to, like, go outside and just, like, yell. Like, just, like, yell at people walking by. Like, not yell anything, just like caveman guttural, like.
Yeah, I used to get like that. I think
I've been better since I've been off, but there's these few times on my Twitter feed I'm like, oh, Nintendo, Sony, and then it's like political posts, and I'm like,
yeah. I think I've come to the point where, like, I see stuff like that, and I'm just like, it's just the way it is, I guess. And it's kind of like, I've realized that it's just social media. Like, I feel like I just don't see this stuff in real life, unless you're on a college campus. And I do agree that it's starting to bleed out into the real world with all these students. But my experience has been, I was very similar to that when I was in college. I was still, like, before I had my whatever, I was the type to be like, probably shouldn't do that, or, like, to be offended on behalf of people. But once I got out of college and, like, joined the workforce in the real world and stuff, it kind of, I feel like I just dawned on me that, like, that's not a way to live your life. Like, to be perpetually offended. Like, I don't know. But
it's like your boss isn't going to really care when they shoot down your project. What? That offends me. It's like, well, I heard they're hiring across the street. Have fun.
Yeah, I don't know. It does scare me sometimes, but I think I've come around to the fact that I think there's plenty of people who are fighting against the mentality that I think it's going to be fine. But
I don't think I would get, and
we definitely took that a whole different way.
Yeah, sorry. This is what happens.
I mean,
when Zach isn't
I
here.
think that all to say, like, I mean, I knew this one wasn't going to be.
Yeah.
It's ironic we're talking about comedy, but we're not being funny at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's just let comedians be comedians. I think that's the takeaway here. Like, I don't know. It's such a finicky thing because it's like, well, I didn't find James Gunn's tweets funny, so it's not comedy. But like, aren't we also arguing against what we're saying then?
Yeah.
By saying that.
Well,
and so it's kind of just like, learn to take a joke. Like, if you don't find it funny, why do you got to get offended about it? Why do you got to raise up arms?
And I think there's a difference in response too. Like I think there's a difference between saying like, I didn't find James Gunn's tweets funny, so he should be fired, and I don't think they're funny, whatever, screw him. Versus like, I don't find them funny because he like graphically depicts, provocative acts with a child in very like staunch language that is very offsetting. That's different than saying like, I didn't find it funny. It's like, okay, like what does that mean? Like that doesn't really mean anything. And that to me is the Twitter argument. It's like the reason I didn't find those funny versus like, why. It's like the reason I don't find that funny versus the reason I find like Herbert the Pervert funny. Like Herbert the Pervert is just the most like terrible, awkward character, but he's like also this like endearing, terrible old man who's like never going to be able to do what he wants to do. But at the same time, you're like, gosh, he's just so awful. Like,
yep.
Versus this thing where you're like, that's sick. Like if you were to say that and not say like, oh, it's a joke, it's like when someone like says something malicious and they're like, oh, I was just joking. And you're like,
I don't think you were.
I don't think
you
that's,
can't just say
I think by definition, you shouldn't have to explain the joke and whatever.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think
it's a very tricky world, the comedy world.
And I'm sure we contradicted ourselves, but to that point, like,
that's kind of the point. It's just
everything is sticky. It's like, and it's complicated and it's hard and it
can't be distilled down to social media,
right? Like, and we're not gonna, and especially we're not gonna solve it when everyone is coming at it from their own perspective and they're so deeply concrete in their perspective that they can't even listen or like have a conversation about it without throwing some profanity to tear down the other person on the other side, no matter how much they're doing, and everyone's just screaming. And it's like, people just need to chill out and realize that life is freaking messy and people are going to do stupid stuff. I'm not surprised about it. But we need to take things and like calm down, look at how to handle it, what's the best thing to do, and then do that thing. Not like, hey, did you hear this guy said this? Yeah, let's get him. Like, that's what it feels like right now.
Yeah.
And that really needs to stop.
Yeah. Which again is ironic because the James Gunn thing didn't happen because of the usual offenders.
Exactly.
It happened because of the people who are supposedly
fighting for the right to be offensive. So whatever.
Yep.
This world is backwards. But you know what's not backwards is where you can find our podcast, which is iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, and Stitcher. We have a Redbubble that has some merch. We've got
for the pod.
Our Twitter feed, which is at Pop Culture Punks. We've got our Gmail, which you can send questions and answers to, which Phil filled us in on at the top of the hour, which is popculturepunks@gmail.com. That's where Mark has been sending all his glorious comments and really heavy questions. So if anyone hated this episode, it's Mark's fault.
Yeah, buddy.
Just kidding, Mark. I'll see you
No, it was
next
a good
week.
question.
It was a very
I think
good question.
The nature of the question necessitated.
Yeah, and I think the nature
level
of our perspective,
pessimism.
too. We were just like, I remember we were texting and planning, and we're like, we need to be very careful because we're gonna get so juiced and like just rant, but which I guess we did, but we did not rant politically, which I know that was our thing, was to like go like in the middle of them and be like, both sides, get out of here.
Yeah.
So anyway,
let comedy be comedy. I don't know what that voice was.
It's your old man. This is Josh from the future where
we're not allowed to laugh anymore because all jokes have been banned. It's not very fun. It's not very enjoyable. But, you know.
Oh, gosh.
It is what it is.
Late.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. If you don't want episodes to be this depressing, then send us
some fun questions.
Funny things to talk about or funny ideas. And with that, we'll catch you next week. We bid you a fond cowabunga.
I'm fat.
Job security, but I've been dreaming about packing it all up, cause the war in me just won't relent till there's nothing left but dust. So what do you do when the walls start closing in and everyone you love tells you it's all just in your head?